What if you could live your entire financial life again, but this time, with everything you've learned from the mistakes that cost you the most? If I were 25 again, standing in 2026, I wouldn't chase brilliance. I'd chase survival. Because the world keeps changing its clothes: AI today, crypto yesterday, tulips once upon a time, but human nature stays naked. The same greed, the same envy, the same noise. And if I had to start over now, I'd build wealth the slow, unfashionable way, with silence, discipline, and boredom. Because the truth is, you don't need to be a genius to get rich. You just need to stop being stupid long enough for time to reward you. That's what I'd do differently in 2026. Before he was known as one of the greatest investors of all time, Charlie Munger was just another man trying to survive the storms of his own making. He didn't inherit wealth. He built it while burying his own pain, one disciplined choice at a time. In his early years, money wasn't the goal, it was the shield. A way to protect himself from the chaos he'd already lived through. When the Great Depression hit, he watched his family lose everything. He saw neighbors hide cash in walls, friends turn against friends, and optimism vanish overnight. He learned early that money doesn't make you safe, behavior does. By 1940, he wasn't chasing the next big thing, he was chasing stability. He studied relentlessly. Not markets. Not charts. But human nature. He realized that people don't lose money because they're stupid. They lose it because they can't control their impulses. If I started in 2026, he'd say, I wouldn't look for the next Tesla or the next Bitcoin. I'd look for the next version of patience. Because the best investors aren't smarter, they're just calmer, longer. And every time the world gets louder, restraint becomes more valuable. In 2026, people call it AI investing, quant trading, copy portfolios. He'd call it something simpler: trying too hard. Because the truth Charlie understood is that great wealth doesn't come from doing more. It comes from repeating the right thing long enough to look boring. If I started in 2026, Munger once said, I wouldn't start by looking for opportunities. I'd start by eliminating stupidity. Because the world doesn't reward brilliance, it punishes carelessness. Most investors in 2026 think they need to outsmart the algorithms, find hidden crypto gems, or time the next market crash. But Charlie would say you don't need to play 10 games well. You need to avoid losing the only one that matters. He believed that half of wealth creation is simply avoiding self-destruction. So what would he do differently now? Let's walk through it. First, he'd start by doing what almost no one does anymore: thinking slowly. He'd spend months learning, not trading. Reading financial statements, not headlines. Watching companies like people, not tickers. He'd look for simplicity that hides beneath noise. Businesses that make money without convincing you they're changing the world. He'd probably own companies like Coca-Cola, Costco, or Apple, not because they're exciting, but because they're predictable. He once said, the world isn't driven by genius. It's driven by incentives. So he'd look for companies where people are rewarded for the right behavior, not the loudest ambition. Second, he'd avoid the temptation of speed. In a world that trades thousands of times per second, Charlie would trade maybe twice a year. He'd say, if you can't find a company worth holding for 10 years, it's not worth holding for 10 minutes. Third, he'd use technology, but never depend on it. He'd study data, but not worship it. He'd use AI to find insights, not shortcuts. Because intelligence without wisdom is just faster foolishness. Fourth, he'd embrace what he called anti-fragility. The idea that strength isn't about avoiding loss, it's about benefiting from chaos. In 2026, that means building a portfolio that grows even when the world shakes. He'd buy assets that survive volatility, companies with cash flow, low debt, and products people still buy when they're scared. And most importantly, he'd hold cash. Not because cash grows, but because it protects your mind. It keeps you from being forced to act stupidly when everyone else is panicking. He used to say, "You don't need to be smarter than the market. You just need to be more patient than everyone in it." In 2026, that patience would look like heresy. Because everyone wants to 10x overnight. But Charlie would rather 2x and sleep peacefully. And that's the real turning point, the shift from greed to calmness, from chasing wealth to preserving it. Because in the end, Munger didn't win by predicting the future. He won by staying sane in a world that kept losing its mind. If I started investing in 2026, Charlie once said, I'd prepare to be lonely. Because patience isn't rewarded in public. It's punished. Imagine holding cash while everyone around you brags about doubling their money overnight. Imagine reading annual reports while your friends mint NFTs and flip tech stocks. You look like the fool until time proves you weren't. Charlie always believed the biggest cost of rationality is isolation. He said, to think independently, you must be willing to look stupid for a very long time. In 2026, that truth has never been more brutal. The market no longer tests your intelligence, it tests your emotional endurance. Because now, information spreads in seconds. Prices move before thoughts even form. And yet, the timeless rule remains unchanged: money still flows from the impatient to the patient. Charlie would have no interest in chasing the new wave of AI startups or speculative coins. He'd quietly accumulate ownership in cash-generating businesses, boring, predictable, quietly compounding wealth. While others obsess over what's next, he'd obsess over what lasts. He'd spend his mornings reading. Not scrolling, not reacting, reading. He'd study behavior, not algorithms. Because human psychology doesn't upgrade every year, it repeats every generation. He'd remind himself, markets don't go crazy. People do. And when the next crash comes, and it always does, he'd do the same thing he's always done: nothing. He'd sit, hold, and watch chaos burn itself out. Most investors in 2026 will panic, post, or pivot. Charlie would breathe. He'd once said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. That was his philosophy in everything: avoid stupidity before chasing brilliance. The consequence? He'd look boring, unimpressive, forgettable. But in time, the results would speak silently but clearly. Because while others lose sleep over volatility, he'd sleep peacefully knowing his portfolio isn't a gamble, it's ownership of real, cash-producing businesses. He wouldn't try to predict 2026's next trend. He'd try to survive its next correction. And while others treat money like adrenaline, he'd treat it like oxygen, vital, invisible, and never to be wasted. That's the paradox of investing the Munger way. You'll feel wrong for years, then suddenly, you'll look like a genius. But he didn't care about looking like one. He cared about becoming one quietly, steadily, over decades. And that's the ultimate consequence of wisdom. You win not by competing harder, but by refusing to play the stupid games everyone else is losing. If I started investing in 2026, I wouldn't just study numbers. I'd study myself. Because the biggest market in the world isn't the stock market, it's the market inside your own mind. That's where fear trades with greed. Where patience competes with ego. Where logic fights emotion every single day. I've seen geniuses go broke, and I've seen ordinary men build fortunes not because of intelligence, but temperament. Temperament is everything. It's the discipline to do nothing when doing something feels urgent. It's the strength to stay calm when everyone else is screaming opportunity. And it's the humility to say, I don't know, when everyone else pretends they do. In 2026, that humility will be rarer than gold. We live in an age that rewards certainty, loud voices, fast opinions, quick answers. But markets don't reward noise. They reward silence, the kind that allows clarity to grow. If I were young again, Munger would say, I'd make curiosity my religion and ignorance my teacher. Because the moment you stop learning, the market stops teaching. Every dollar you earn is just tuition for the next lesson. The older I got, the more I realized, money doesn't change you. It just exposes who you were all along. If you were restless when you were broke, you'll be anxious when you're rich. If you were humble when you had nothing, you'll be generous when you have everything. The game doesn't make the player, it reveals him. I used to think the goal was to win. Now I understand, the goal is to last. Because survival, not brilliance, is the foundation of wealth. Every great fortune started with one simple act, not quitting when it was easiest to. When I look at investors today, I see a generation trained to chase, not to hold. Trained to predict, not to prepare. Trained to perform, not to understand. And that's why the same lessons repeat every decade. Greed rises, patience falls, and wisdom gets ignored. If I could speak to every investor under 40, I'd tell them this. You don't need to be first. You need to be consistent. You don't need to find the next big thing. You need to keep what you've already earned. And you don't need to time the market. You need to stop wasting time. Because time is the only asset that compounds faster than money. Every second you spend learning patience is worth more than a year chasing profit. And every mistake you don't make, every stupid impulse you resist, is a dividend paid in peace. That's the truth. No one sells because you can't monetize contentment. But I promise you this, the day you stop needing more, you've already won. When I was younger, I used to watch people race past me, new cars, new homes, new deals. And I thought I was behind. Then I watched them again 10 years later and most were gone. Burned out. Broken. Bankrupt. They didn't lose their money first. They lost their patience. And when patience dies, wealth follows. The irony of investing is that the finish line keeps moving until you decide to stop running. The most successful investors aren't the fastest. They're the quietest. They measure wealth not in dollars, but in time to think, time to read, time to rest, time to be with the people they love. That's what enough really means. It's not giving up on growth. It's giving up on noise. If I started again in 2026, I'd invest in what I can't lose: knowledge, health, and relationships that compound longer than any stock could. Because money, at best, buys you a seat at life's table. But character decides whether you stay. When I was 40, I thought wealth was about having choices. When I turned 90, I realized wealth is about having peace with the choices you've already made. That's the final stage of investing wisdom. Not just knowing what to buy, but knowing what to stop chasing. Not just earning returns, but returning to what matters. And not just building wealth, but becoming someone who deserves to keep it. In 2026, the markets will rise and fall, trends will fade, and fortunes will come and go. But the rules that protect you, the habits that preserve you, they won't change. Read daily. Think independently. Spend less than you earn. And above all, stay rational when it hurts most. Because that's when compounding really begins. In the end, the goal isn't to retire rich. It's to retire calm. Because calm, true calm, is the highest form of wealth there is. I used to believe that investing was about finding the best company. Now I realize, it's about finding the best version of yourself. Because the stock market doesn't test your knowledge. It tests your patience, your ego, your need to be right. When I was younger, I wanted to be the smartest investor in the room. Now, I'd rather be the calmest. Munger used to say the big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting. And I think he meant something deeper than finance. Because in life too, the big rewards don't come from constant action. They come from quiet endurance. From not reacting when everyone else panics. From trusting your process, even when it feels like it's failing. In 2026, the world is loud. Every voice is shouting, buy this, sell that, don't miss out. But the older I get, the more I see. The best investors aren't chasing trends. They're protecting their peace. They build portfolios that let them sleep at night. They understand that wealth without calm is still poverty. Because money is not meant to make you anxious, it's meant to make you free. And maybe that's what Munger was really teaching us all along. That rationality is just emotional discipline wearing a suit. That your real advantage is not in your IQ, but in your temperament. I've met people who earn millions and still live like beggars, always chasing, never arriving. And I've met others with modest investments who wake up every morning feeling wealthy. Not because of what they own, but because they've stopped comparing. That's the part no one tells you about investing. The more you grow your portfolio, the more you risk losing yourself in it. Your peace, your time, your joy, all traded for one more percentage point. So when Munger said, if I started investing today, I think what he meant was he wouldn't chase the next Tesla. He'd chase the next moment of stillness. He'd build not just wealth, but a life that makes sense. Because at the end, every investment has a cost. And the highest one is the peace you trade away while trying to get rich. Maybe that's why his advice feels timeless. Because it's not about money at all. It's about wisdom. The kind that compounds quietly, while the rest of the world burns itself out trying to catch up. Pause. Piano fades slightly, tone deepens. If I started investing in 2026, I wouldn't ask what can make me the most money. I'd ask what can make me the most calm. Because wealth is not a number anymore. It's the ability to wake up without fear. To know that your future is not dependent on someone else's panic. To sit in silence and feel safe. That's the kind of return I want. And no market crash can take that away. When the markets go silent, and the charts stop moving, you begin to hear something else. The sound of your own life returning. It's faint at first. Like a clock ticking in an empty room. Like the breath you forgot to take between trades. Charlie Munger once said, "Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up." And I think, in the end, that's all that really matters. Not how much you earn. Not what your portfolio looks like. But whether you became a little wiser, a little calmer, a little more at peace with the life you already have. Because real wealth was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be understood. Munger lived 99 years not by running faster than others, but by learning when to slow down, when to wait, when to let compounding do the work in money, in wisdom, in patience. He called it the power of sitting still. And maybe that's the greatest investing lesson of all. That time, not talent, is the real multiplier. Soft music continues, a little warmer. When you finally have enough, you stop asking, "What should I buy next?" And you start asking, "What should I protect now?" Your peace. Your relationships. Your years. Because one day, the charts will fade. The news will quiet. And all that will remain, is what you built within yourself. And if you can look back and say, "I invested in calmness, in patience, in peace," then you've already won a game most people don't even realize they're playing. Munger's greatest investment wasn't in companies. It was in character. And maybe that's why he never really died. Because his ideas keep compounding inside everyone who listens. So if I were to start investing today, I wouldn't just ask how to make money. I'd ask how to make meaning. How to make time. How to make life feel simple again. Because someday, your account balance will stop moving. But your memories, your patience, your quiet confidence, they'll keep compounding long after the final bell rings.